Thank you so much for viewing our talk, Forming Meaningful Relationships in Games. Your two presenters are Jamie Cameron, your resident dating sim programmer, and Cam Perry, your resident dating sim narrative design expert. We have wanted to give this talk somewhere since when we first made our first game together, which was about 3 years ago, and yes, it was a dating sim. In this talk, we will be discussing current uses of relationship forming in games and how it can be applied to most any gameplay to create a unique interactive experience. There's various methods on how to add relationship aspect to games. We all likely know at least one game that utilizes these systems, and they often create a very personal experience for the player. We have just a few examples here, and they likely elicit some type of emotional response to those who have played them. The relationships these games provide some of the most impactful moments that the player remembers from these games. We experience love, hate, heartbreak, and all different kinds of emotions from playing these games, and they use systems that you too can start using to design these moments. So the visual novel is the traditional place you see romance options in games. Games such as Mystic Messenger allow players to have intimate experience with NPCs. I can promise you this was the only time I have ever answered a phone for a man past 10 p.m., whether fictional or not. Other games such as the Phoenix Wright series don't use romantic relationships. Rather, they make the player feel like they are part of a family. Games such as Dream Daddy provide multiple romanceable options which give the player agency. They can make the objectively wrong choice and go for the suburban dad, or make the correct choice and go for the one that works at the coffee shop. The choice is all yours. So we will be going on to how these systems are used.
So dialogue. Dialogue is an element that can be used in almost any way. This is an example of a more visual novel style of using it, where you can choose a character that you want to talk to, and then you can just talk to them. Learn about who they are, what they like, the usual. In these scenes, there's usually little to no choice. It's solely meant to learn about the character. Here in Doki Doki Literature Club, you can choose which girl you want to talk to, and further talk with her on the given day to learn more about her. And then sometimes you get a cute cutscene. On the flip side, dialogue can also be used in a much different way, like how Telltale or Fallout uses it. Here in these dialogue systems, the choices you make influence the gameplay. Telltale is the classic your words matter games. They really make sure to hammer home the fact that your choices matter. With the, when you make a choice, the so-and-so will remember that in the corner, or the just whenever you have a choice and it says silence is also a valid option. And then as you can see in the photo, at the end of each episode, it shows you how your choices could have been handled differently, or how you could have responded differently. In Fallout, choices are they're similar but a bit different. In Fallout, dialogue choices can be used to convince a character of doing something for you, avoiding a fight, or just another way to avoid talking about something unsavory you had done earlier. Usually Fallout games have a charisma stat that can limit you to what you can say, so to really take advantage of these dialogue options, you need to make your character somewhat charismatic. If you look at the screenshot we have, based on what the player says next, you can either placate this man, aggravate him further, or just act aloof, and each of these choices will yield a different way to handle the situation. One of the more common types of dating sim elements is the heart system. This is very simple. If you give a gift or do something nice to a character, you gain a heart. Sometimes if you're mean, you lose a heart. This can also be abstracted out to the whole, I did a mini game and I did it really well, so now you gain a heart. Basically, do something nice, you win. Do something mean, you lose. The Sims does this by showing a little bar that indicates your relationship with another Sim, and Harvest Moon is a bit more obvious, where whenever you talk to a romanceable character, there's a little heart that gets bigger as your relationship grows.
Giving and receiving gifts is one type of love language that is often explored in video games. Oftentimes, characters have items that they like and dislike, and getting to know each character is part of the experience. The idea that an NPC can have unique likes and dislikes personifying them and make the player want to figure out what is best. Games such as Stardew Valley use the gift-giving system to unlock personal stories for each character. When I played, I was glued on the Wikipedia of the gift system. It was really intense. Having each NPC have a unique like that affects the relationship with the player attempts to simulate real-life personality. Stardew Valley complements the system by unlocking extra dialogue with love characters that expand their personality. The combination of these two efforts make the game personal for players. Fire Emblem Three Houses also uses a similar system where you can give gifts to your peers, and this expands the relationship with them. And this can be used both in a platonic and romantic way. This type of relationship building relies on other stats of the game. In this, the player chooses who to level up with not only based on how they feel about the character, but also about what bonuses they might get. This is the most direct way to gamify a meaningful relationship as it is intertwined with how the player can advance in the game. Traditionally, this is found in RPGs that also have a stat system in place. For example, reaching the max relationship with a party character in Persona 5 gives you an incredible boost to their persona, which is the way they attack in the game. This not only rewards the player emotionally by feeling closer with the character, but also gives them a direct buff for other gameplay. An example of a game that really well combines all of these is Hades. For those of you who have not yet played, one, I highly recommend it, and two, it is a roguelike dungeon crawler that takes place in the Greek underworld. You play as an angry Zagreus as he tries to escape the underworld and his father's wrath. During this, you meet other people of the underworld, and you have the option to romance 3 of them. To form a relationship in this game, you have to give them nectar, which is found on runs in the game. When you start the game, you are at 0 hearts with everyone, and the only way to build hearts is by giving them these nectars. There is no automatic advances, and if you want, you can play the game without advancing with anyone. While you play it and you are on a run, you have the choice at certain points to go into rooms that give you nectar. You can then use these gifts to mostly any character of your choosing. Some gods that you give nectars to in-game will give you bonuses, such as keepsakes, which is on the left. But you can also give them to the few romanceable characters to form a deeper relationship with. For both of these, you get additional dialogue, but the only official romance option are the 3 on the right. This game combines all the previous ideas and does so amazingly. While you can beat the game without giving out nectars, it is extremely difficult, and most people will end up forming some type of relationship with characters to progress the game faster. So now we will go into why these increase player engagement. Forming emotional connections, even those that might be fictional, are important to maintaining positive mental health. Though these do not by any means need to be romantic, just the feeling of having a platonic relationship releases cortisol, which is linked to having less stress. At least that's what Northwestern Medical tells me. I don't know bio. In games, we get connected to characters we form relationships with, and through gameplay, it feels as if you are going through real experience with them, and for all intents and purposes, you are. So some of the most memorable moments in games are those that play with the user's emotions. Because games have that unique opportunity to immerse players more than other types of media, it often creates the strongest emotional response. Studies have shown that games are able to elicit different types of emotion because we, the audience, have a certain amount of player agency that mimics real-life situations. I added just a few of my favorites here, and I personally cannot take it when anyone dies in Fire Emblem, and just the drawings of the Rosalina pictures, make me emotional. And her little Lumas, it's adorable. Attachment to a character happens when the player has a particular fondness related to some character. There have been some studies done regarding how players get attached to them, but it basically boils down to the fact that players interacting with NPCs create the same bonds as human interactions. We're able to sympathize with the characters in the same way we would sympathize with any other person. This can be used to create an emotionally deep character, but as a designer, you should also be wary of purposely exploiting this. The Last of Us is a perfect example of how attachment to a character severely affects how and why we play the game. I'll be honest, I was not able to touch The Last of Us. I did not have a PS4 until recently, but I did watch compilations of Joel right when the game was coming out because everyone was talking about how lovable of a character he was. As I watched and listened to people play Last of Us Part 2, I realized just how attached I was to him. And now I actually don't think that the second game exists.
Okay, so here's another system about forming meaningful relationships. It's something that you might think is in every game, but of course it is. If you have characters that your players don't care about, then they're not going to be as invested in the game. Why would you play a game where you're not invested in the characters? A normalized phone is an interesting example of this. You, the player, never actually directly interact with any other characters, But as you play, you still grow more attached to the person who used to be this phone's owner. And by the end of this game, the only options the player has is to help the person. As the player, you form this non-romantic relationship with the phone owner where you want the best for them and hope they are happy wherever they are. If this game were only about unlocking a phone to give it back to the owner or something, I'm not sure it'd be as engaging as it is. When you play a normalized phone, you're playing to find out who Sam is, what happened to her, and where she's going now. Going through a stranger's phone as a concept by itself is interesting, but when you allow the player to form this bond, it adds a lot more to the game. The next is experiencing relationship without consequence. I'm sure everyone has played a game where your choices matter and there's inevitably that good and evil choice. And depending on how invested you are in the game, this can be a very hard choice to make. I know I personally always feel bad choosing the evil options, but you have to, because you have to experience everything. So you might want to save before choosing, so you don't make the wrong choice. But all in all, in the grand scheme of things, there's no real consequences to any of the choices you make. All you have to do is reload the save, and everything's back to normal. Characters are none the wiser. This idea can be applied to characters as well. If there's a character who you like, you're going to not want to make them upset or angry at you. When you're interacting with them, you'll probably only be nice and appear to be a very good person, possibly choosing your words or actions to make the character like you more. Unlike in real life, where there's no save or reload button, in games, you're able to do whatever you want, more or less. And both of these pictures show how the relationships have no consequences. If you end up romancing all of the romanceable options, they get mad at you, but at the same time, you can always just reload your saves. A really good example that encompasses everything that we just talked about is The Walking Dead Season 1, which I highly encourage everyone to play. It is the classic Telltale game. Your choices feel like they matter, and you are just so invested in all these characters. You play as Lee, and you form this bond with Clem, who's a little girl. You are not biologically related. It's just the situation that brought you two together, along with other characters in the game. As you're playing, you can build this relationship with her and everyone else, but you also, regardless of how you play it, if you decide to play it very seriously, where you only want to be nice, or very rudely, where you are just awful, you still build up these relations and form this bond with people, regardless if they hate you or not. And the relationship that you build influences everything you do, but at the same time, you can always go back to a previous chapter to redo what you did.
Now we will talk about how we use these systems. So a great example of this is Crusader Kings 3 versus Hearts of Iron 4. If you don't know, they are both really intense real-time strategy games that require the player to have a decent amount of knowledge about its system. However, Crusader Kings tends to be more popular because it balances out its intense mechanical system with light narrative. You play as a ruler with an actual player model and dialogue, and you have responsibilities to your people and other royalty. While it is very easy to get tired out by Hearts of Iron 4, the added idea of balancing out a complex system with even more complex relationships actually works in its favor.
Next two games are the Shin Megami Tensei series and the Persona series. So both these games are extremely similar. Persona was based off of Shin Megami Tensei and stemmed from it. Both games, they're JRPGs where you fight demons, collect demons, and eventually fight God. Sorry for the spoilers. The main difference between them is that Shin Megami Tensei is very invested in its mechanics, and then Persona is an anime game. So in Shin Megami Tensei, it's all combat. There's some narrative element to it, but it is mostly focused on its mechanics and its combat. Persona, on the other hand, while it uses a similar combat system, again, Persona was built off of Shin Megami Tensei. You can also build up your stats by hanging out with your teammates and other characters. Like Jamie mentioned earlier, in Persona, the way to make your battling characters more powerful is to build up relationships with your teammates along with other NPCs. You can date certain characters if you want to, or just keep it a platonic relationship. But all in all, the RPG combat is more or less the same. The only difference is that Persona is a bit newer, so it has a bit newer mechanics. But despite these games being so similar, Persona is infinitely more popular on the mainstream than Shin Megami Tensei is. So the only logical conclusion we can draw is that Persona is more popular because of these dating sim elements that they include. So the last part of our talk is about brainstorming how you can do these in your games.
Yeah, so we're going to take a super simple idea. So this is a Picross board. If for those of you who don't know, Picrosses are logic puzzles where you have to fill in a board based on a given number. Once completed, the board often resembles an image. It's a very, very simple mechanic, and we are going to expand on it.
Oh, no. Cool. So first thing, let's start simple. Make it a cute dating sim. So instead of just solving the puzzle to make pictures, we're going to use our puzzle solving skills to now progress a narrative and date someone of our choosing. So now when you, as you can see in the picture, if you, on the very bottom one, after you're done romancing someone, you get to do the date pick cross and then you can date them. Or the one above it, as you're doing the pick cross, this is the puzzle to learn more about the puzzle piece.
Don't want to make a dating sim? That's fine. Want to go crazy? Well, now have no fear. Murder by Numbers is here. Now we can solve puzzles to uncover clues. This way of using Picross to uncover clues and the visual novel format to hold the dating sim aspects, and this makes an already fun premise even stronger. Okay, in conclusion, we highly encourage you to spend time playing around with these systems in your next game. Thank you so much for listening to something we are so extremely passionate about, and I hope you all enjoyed it. As a parting gift, we are going to leave our hottest takes here, which includes Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 and NFL Madden. And just a little ending note about your host, Jamie, Cam, where to find us. It's mostly just Twitter. And yeah, thank you for listening.